Good morning, folks. We're just having a few more people come on board at the moment, so if you just wait another minute or so, we should have a full complement. So John and I look forward to speaking to you shortly. Okay, I think we've got most of our registrants are now on board, and thank you very much. Well, good morning, everybody, from wherever you may be, and welcome to this session from Iconic. My name is Stephen Davis. I'm the sales director for the legal segment, and joined, well, on my screen, he's there. Actually, no, he's there if I do that. Is MD and founder Dr. John Tinsley, who will be taking you through Iconic's integration with Relativity. Now, there's a lot going on this week. You can obviously see from the email we sent you that to run alongside what's happening with Legal Week, we've got a series of demonstrations of a number of things that we've been doing, and you've probably seen a few teasers over the last week. So this session is all about how we work with Relativity. But later on in the day, we'll be looking at our new product, which is Intra, which is a way of accessing our machine translation online that is agnostic of any review platform. And that, to some people, should be quite interesting, those that don't have Relativity or might want their lawyers to have a secure desktop version of what we do without the need for going via Relativity. So you see the timetable there is put in front of you. You know, if there's anything that you think you've missed from here, then please feel free to come back to it. And there is a sort of wrap-up Q&A session on February the 4th there. Right, now, as regards what's happening today, please, if you've got any questions, put them in the questions box. You're all on mute, so you won't be able to actively shout out and put your hand up, but please stick any questions you might have in the questions box, and we'll get to those at the end of this demonstration. If you haven't got any and you want to follow up later, well, that's fine. You can do that also. You know how to get hold of us. First name @iconictranslation.com. We'll be delighted to answer any questions you may have. Right, the last thing I'm going to do before I hand over to John is just briefly introduce you to Iconic and some of the technology that we have. Pretty self-evident there. We do partner with some of the world's largest corporations, law firms, and service providers, and our ethos is fast, effective, and secure solutions for dealing with multilingual content for litigation, compliance, and beyond. What's important and what's different about us is that it's our proprietary, I can't speak properly this morning, more tea needed, neural machine translation technology. We're not necessarily rebadging somebody else's, which is important to you as users or prospective users. Our stuff is secure. We spend a lot of time ensuring it's secure. Our client base is, as you'd expect, the world's largest law firms and service providers, and security is key. And we provide our services both via Relativity, via our own app, from the cloud, and securely on-prem. And it really depends on what you or the end user requires, but we're amenable to lots of different ways of looking at it. And our stuff is integrated as standalone, and it's today the integrated stuff via Relativity that we're going to show you. So without further ado, I'm handing over to John, font of all knowledge, the man with the PhD in this subject matter. John, take it away.
Super. Thanks very much, Stephen. Yeah, good morning, folks. So generally speaking, over the course of the week, we're going to try to keep these sessions to around half an hour, leaving a little bit of time for questions at the end. So as Stephen said, make sure you pop them in the box. We'll be giving more of this, repeating the session. So if you didn't get to ask something in one of them, you can join another session and ask, and then also the Q&A session on Thursday. So this session is all about showing you how our machine translation software integrates into Relativity, the document review platform. So there's an assumption coming into this. The prerequisites for this session are that you're familiar with Relativity, what it does, how it works, probably more so than I am. And so I'm going to show you how we integrate within Relativity. And I guess there's an assumption as well that I guess you understand why you might need machine translation for e-discovery. So this is really, after you've decided that you need machine translation, this is the part where we kind of show you then how it works, how you can use it, how you can organize it, and how it takes care of your data. A little bit of a background. So what I'm showing you here in Relativity is the most recent version of Relativity. So this is Relativity 1, 12.0 AeroUI. Our first version of the Relativity app was integrated into 9.4, and we've probably had about 50 versions of our app since then. I think that's an important point to say, that this is not just something that we built to check a box to say, yes, we integrate with Relativity. This is a product that we're constantly building upon. We're constantly adding new features, we're constantly fixing things, we're constantly taking feedback from our users, so that we can basically make the experience better for you. So without further ado, everything is designed in Relativity to how you might want to service your requirements or your customers' requirements, depending on whether you're a service provider or a law firm, or maybe just the end user itself. So everything we do is organized on a workspace level. So you can have the app installed in some workspaces, you cannot have it installed in other workspaces, and you can configure it differently across them, literally depending on the needs of a particular matter. So what happens here is, and in Rel 1, this is really simple. If you want the Iconic app installed in your instance, you just ask your CSM, and they'll put it there, and Bob's your uncle. It's as easy as that. If you have Relativity on premise, we'll provide you with the wrap file, and you need to do a little bit more setup. But again, best case, you're talking 10 minutes. Worst case, you're talking an hour or two before the app is set up and you're ready to go. So once you have the app installed in a workspace, you will see basically that we have a couple of things that we add to the UI, and we have two particular tabs that we create custom pages for. Everything else is integrated into the app itself. So those two tabs that we create are under C, the configuration tab, and under R, the request history tab. I'm going to show you the configuration tab now, because that's where you set things up, and I'll show you the request history at the end. So configuration, again, this is workspace specific. This is how you get the app ready to go to use and actually run translations. So from top to bottom, what you're seeing here is the API key. That is your subscription. So we can talk about commercial models later, but basically we have a subscription-based model, and that is attached to your key. You can use that subscription across all of your different matters and workspaces, and then work out how you want to do the administration of the billing later, or you could have a different subscription for each matter, again, depending on completely on how you want to organize it. The Iconic server is the endpoint of our service where we process your data. And this is a critical point, particularly around information security, what's happening with your data. So our default API is based in Ireland, in the EU. However, we also have servers in the US. You can also deploy on-premise, and we have the possibility to stand up translation servers in other jurisdictions too. So again, depending on the needs of your matter, you can configure where you actually want to process the data. And again, you can do that on a case-by-case, workspace-by-workspace basis. The authorized group is the review group within Relativity, where you can actually, who can actually access the application. So you can create a review group here. We've called this one Iconic Translation Users. If you're in that review group, you can click the translate button, you can request translations. If you're not in that review group, you can't click the translate button and request translations, but you can still see the translations that a user has produced. So again, as an administrator, that gives you a bit of control over who can run translations, as it's a cost incurring exercise. But if you have reviewers logging in to look at the translations and assess them, they'll still be able to do that. The web API URL is not something you need to worry about in Rel 1. And then the last 2 points are just a couple of settings. A lot of our users are always translating into the same language, so you can set that here as a default. You can select from the languages that we support. We'll select English in this case. And then another feature, we allow users to translate either the extracted text or a native file within Relativity. So you can set that as a default here too. Again, these are just defaults. You can override them at runtime, but it's just to save you a few clicks. So once you've completed the configuration, you click the Save button, configuration saved successfully, and then we click Validate. And what we're looking for here is 4 green ticks, and if we get them, it means the app is configured correctly and ready to use. And almost there. So what you're seeing here is top, we can connect to Iconic's authentication server. Your subscription, your API key is valid, it has credit, it's not expired, and it's a real key. You have agents installed and enabled in Relativity, because they're the guys that do the work, and the agents can reach our service. So 4 green ticks, the app is configured in this workspace, and it is now ready to use. So if we go to the document viewer, and let's show you how exactly we run some translations. So, well, I guess the first thing to show you here in the document viewer is that we create 2 new fields. We have an iconic translation status and an iconic translation family. The status might be obvious what it suggests. It is the status of the translation of a particular document. If it's empty, these documents haven't been translated yet. This status could also be submitted, which means it's in the queue for translation, in progress, which means translation is actually running at that time, completed, which means the translation is done, and failed, which means translation was tried but wasn't successful for some reason. And the translation family I'll come to shortly is basically how we link translated native files to their original. So we've conveniently got documents sorted by language over here. If I go to these Italian ones, you can see 3 of them were translated, the rest aren't. So 2 ways to do translation: individual document level or mass action. We'll run a mass action first. So we'll select a couple of documents here, select 3 documents. In the mass action list at the bottom, you'll see there's now an iconic translation option. We click that, we're going to get this pop-up. And this is where you basically tell it what you want to do. So language, source language. So if we don't know what language these documents are, there's an auto detect function in there, which will detect it for each document. If you do know what language the documents are, perhaps from Relativity Analytics, or perhaps because you've already got them conveniently sorted like that, you can specify the language. We recommend specifying it if you know what it is. So we know these guys are Italian, so we're going to select that. And as you can see, we support 50-something languages here within the application. Select Italian. English was preset, like I showed you earlier. We're preset to translate the extracted text as well. But again, you can override that if you just want to translate the natives. If you're translating the extracted text, you can select which long text fields you want to translate. You might have multiple options, so you can select that there. And now it's telling you you've got 3 documents selected. It's only going to be 3 pages that it will take from your subscription. You hit submit, and those files are now sent off to our server. Or well, they're put in the queue, and the agents are going to start working on them and sending them off to our service. So that's one way to translate them as a mass action. The second way is on an individual document level. So if we're viewing a particular individual document here, like this is a German Word document, there's an iconic translate button here in the top right-hand corner. And basically, if you just want to translate this document, you click that button, you're going to get the same interface that you had before. The only difference is that it doesn't tell you how many documents you're translating because you've only got 1 document. Same idea, you click submit, that document will be sent off, and you're ready to go. So 2 ways to send documents for translation: individual document and mass action. And there are 2 formats you can send documents: extracted text or native. So that's how you send translations. How do we view the translation? So that's going to depend on whether you translate the extracted text or the native file. So I know that this file has already been translated. So if we translate the extracted text, simply, we just create a new long text field called English translated text, or whatever language you translate it into, and that's where the translation is. So if we view the extracted text here of this German document, we simply look at the drop-down list. There's an English translated text option, and there is your translation. It's as easy as that. So that's a new long text field attached to that document. It's searchable, so you can run keyword searches on that field as you would any other field in the document. If we translate on the basis of the native file, what we have to do in Relativity is create a new native file, because basically we can't attach the translation of a native file to the original. So we just create a new native file and we link them with the translation family value that I mentioned earlier on. So down in the bottom right-hand corner, you see what we call the translation family pane. And if a native document has been translated, we'll have a family member in here. So you can see there's this original German document, and it now has a family member with the same control number, and we append _ English to it. And that is the native translation of that document. And I think we have this one open here. So if we open that English version of the document, there it is. So this is the original German document, Word document. This is the English translation of that document. You get a extracted text translation as a byproduct of that as well. But then again, with the native, so I guess the question here then would be, why would I translate the native versus the extracted text? So there's a couple of reasons why you might want to do that. Obviously, if you translate the native file, you get a new native file back. So if you translate a Word document, you get a Word document back. All of the formatting and layout of the document is going to be retained. So you have the choice. Sometimes you need that, sometimes you don't. It might depend on the original file format. So if you're translating an email, you're not going to get a lot from the formatting. So often the users will translate extracted text because it's a little bit faster. If you're translating things like PowerPoint presentations or Excel spreadsheets, then it's going to be more useful to have the translation in context in the original native file, and so you might run the native. So essentially, it's a feature, and it's up to you to decide which one you want to do. And as we like to say at this point in the demo, that's it, right? Translation is a detour in the document review process. Ideally, you wouldn't even have to do it. And so in cases where you do have to do it, our goal is to make it as seamless as possible. So the last thing to show you here is what I mentioned at the beginning. It's the other tab that we have, which is the request history view. And this is basically where you can see what's been happening with your translations in the workspace. So what you're seeing here from left to right are the documents that were translated, when they were submitted, by which user, the languages, the file size, the format that was sent for translation, the number of pages and words, and the status of those translations. So you can filter on any of those fields. So if we say just show us Italian translations, and actually now that it's updated, there's the 3 translations that I just ran in the sample earlier on. So you can filter by any of those fields. If you run, for example, a mass action of, let's say, I don't know, 1,000 files, basically what you're going to see here is that most of the files will have a status of submitted, means that they're in the queue in Relativity waiting to be sent out for our service. There will be some files in progress. That means they're on our servers translating at that point in time. And then completed means the translations are done. So as soon as it's done translating with a completed status, you can view them. So you don't have to wait for the entire batch to complete before you start reviewing the translations. If for some reason your translation fails, there'll be a message here which will tell you why it failed, and you'll have the option to retry the translation as well if you want to. So all of this information allows you to see for a particular workspace what's been done and when. You can export all of this information, bottom left-hand corner, to a CSV file. And so again, the reason you might want to do this is you might be sharing your subscription across multiple different workspaces. And so that allows you to see, okay, out of all of our pages, this matter has done this many pages, this client has done this many, and then work out how you want to orchestrate your billing or your administration after that. The last thing that you'll see here in the bottom right-hand corner is an admin view. So only administrators, Relativity admins who are logged in can see this. And this is an overall view of your subscription. So this particular test account we're using has 2 million pages in its subscription. That's quite a lot. That's going to last for a while. And they've used 70,000 of them so far, so 3.5%. And it expires at the end of 2022. So that's how you can monitor kind of the overall usage in the application. And as well, if you get to a certain point of usage or you're getting close to your expiry date, we'll get notified and we'll reach out to you and be able to kind of see what you want to do from that point on. The very last thing to show you is if we go right back out to the instance level, there is one more tab that we have, if we expand, which is called Iconic Workspaces Usage. And we've only got one workspace in this instance, so it's not going to be that useful. But if you have many different applications, many different workspaces within your instance, and they're all using the Iconic application, you're going to see a list of them there, and you'll get an overview of how many pages they have consumed. So you'll get a snapshot there of all these matters. Okay, we can see this one is using a lot of translations, and other ones aren't. And again, it's just to facilitate your administration, let's say, of your account and your subscription. So that's more or less it. Some questions we'll typically get around this time when we're giving demos to clients are how fast the translations are. And the short answer to that question is they're pretty fast, and they can be faster if you need them to be, if you have a deadline and there's a crunch. And obviously, Stephen mentioned the word a number of times. I mentioned it as well. Security is a key factor in this application. So what we do with your data, how we process it, is key as well. So I've already mentioned some of the features, like the ability to select which jurisdiction we process it in. I mentioned that the only time documents are actually with us are when they're in progress. If they're completed or in submitted status, they're still in your Relativity instance, not with us. When they go to us, they go over a secure connection. When they're completed, we send them back. And when all of the translations are done, we spin your translation server down, so that Italian to English server will get turned off, and we retain no traces of any of the data on our side, except what you see there, the information that we log. But absolutely no data is retained on our side. And then as a further level, if you strictly need it, you can take Iconic software on-premise as well, so everything happens within your four walls. But that's pretty much it for now. So conscious of the time, so I'm going to stop here. I'm going to hand back over to Stephen and see if there are any questions.
Great, thank you, John. Yeah, we've got a few in here. There was a question about file formats. What file formats are handled in native? Could you just talk to that briefly?
Yeah, sure. So it doesn't actually say it in the app anywhere, but the short answer is most of the main ones you're going to need. So we will translate all Office documents, so Word documents, PowerPoints, Excel spreadsheets, plain text, of course. We do CSVs, we do PDFs via OCR, and we translate email files. So EML and MSG. So they're the ones that are supported through native format, and in the most cases, you get the same format back, with the exception being MSGs, which come back as plain text, and PDFs, which come back as Word documents. And if there isn't a file format supported that you have in native format, then the ability to translate by the extracted text is the fallback for that.
Great, thank you, John. I've got here another question. Is it possible to only translate a selected page, as a large document might be too expensive to process the whole thing, as opposed to just getting a gist of what's in one particular page?
Sure. So right now that functionality isn't there. So effectively, the translations work on a document level. So the minimum you can do, if I go back to the document translation page, is click that document translate button. However, with the AeroUI that has been recently implemented, so effectively before in Relativity, it wasn't even possible to do that. The UI was kind of was limited to some extent, but I think with the AeroUI, there's a lot more power in the user interface, a lot more power for developers. So I think there would be the ability to select, let's say, a portion of text like that and hit translate, and it would just translate that section. So it is something that's been asked of us before, and it is something that is on our roadmap. But today, the minimum you can translate is an entire document.
Right. Great. And in the remaining 4 minutes, I've got a question here about our pricing models, which I'll have a good stab at answering. There are basically two: cloud, and within cloud, you've got a big sub and a small stub, and they're all prepayment. So for X number of pounds, dollars, euros, you get X thousands of pages payable in advance, but it's rather like a subscription to a cell phone plan, yeah, and you consume against it, and they can be topped up at any time, and anything that's left over carries over to the next sub. So that's on that's cloud subscription, and you get access to all of our languages for that. For on-premise, we install it on a per language basis, a language direction basis, and commonly that's moving towards a fixed price per language, and that tends to be for more matters where security is absolutely paramount, and we have to deploy on servers within a data center that is owned by the end client. We've got lots of experience of doing that as well, but to all intents and purposes, it's cloud first.
Stephen, I might just expand on that a little bit.
Yep.
Again, that can be done from the configuration page that I mentioned.
Yes.
You can have all of your workspaces using your cloud subscription pointing towards our EU data centers, but you might have one particular workspace where you have an on-premise installation of, just Iconic's German to English MT system, and that workspace will use that. So again, you can configure it down to kind of that level of granularity where all workspaces use the cloud, bar one workspace which uses an on-premise version of a particular language.
Right. A question here is actually quite interesting, pertinent, given what's going on with Rel 1. Are there presently any differences between the on-prem version and the app and the Relativity 1 version? John, simple answer.
No. Functionality is exactly the same. The only difference there can be is if it's Rel 1 AeroUI, which is essentially the tabs are on the left. Obviously, there's a lot more powerful functionality going behind it, but from our perspective, in on-premise Rel, where it's not AeroUI, the tabs are along the top. In Rel 1 AeroUI, the tabs are along the left-hand side, but the functionality is absolutely the same. And it's, to that point, I guess. So our translation service and software in the background is always the same. This is one front end on it. When we show the demos of our intra application later on today and tomorrow, that's essentially a different front end on the exact same translation service in the back end. So the translations you get back are exactly the same, regardless of whether it's Rel 1 or on-premise. The translations you get back are exactly the same, whether you translate extracted text or natives. It's just the format that's going to be different. So yeah, everything is consistent across the versions of Relativity.
Right. Great. Now we're coming to the end of our allotted 30 minutes. There's a few other questions that we haven't been able to answer in this session, but we're going to capture those and answer them in the Q&A session that we're doing at the end of the week. So we're not dodging any bullets at all here. So if you feel though one of your questions hasn't been answered, log into our session on I think it's Thursday. And we'll bring those up. And if we forget, please prompt us, because your questions are really important to us because they help drive our development. We would encourage you also to have a look at what we're doing with Intra, and the first opportunity to see that for general public will be at 1500 hours or today, UK Ireland time. And again, I'll just reiterate, there's a live Q&A on Thursday for stuff that we might have missed today. And if you feel that though you've seen something that really floats your boat and you want a personal demo or a trial or whatever, just come through to us. It's either Stephen at iconictranslation.com or John or both at iconictranslation.com. One of us will pick it up. There's a team behind us as well, supporting us all the way. We'll be delighted to show you what we've done and to take your questions and to answer them as best we can. But to all intents and purposes, on behalf of John and myself and the whole team at Iconic, Thank you for your time. Really appreciate it. Don't be strangers. Come and say hello to us and discuss anything that any matters you have arising out of this, and we'll gladly take you through it. So, cheers, folks. Enjoy
Super.
the rest of the day.
Thank you very
Bye.
much. Bye-bye.